Hello, hello, and welcome to Overtime. Number of things to cover. Joe is not available right now. Hopefully he will be joining us very shortly. Looking forward to getting his insight, as always, into these things. He and I are kind of on the same side of the political spectrum, I think, but he's always got an insight that I personally think is very valuable. So hoping he will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, just a few hours ago, using a bow and arrow, no less, a suspect killed 5 people in Norway and injured at least 2 others. He appears to have been stalking them and covered a wide area before he was apprehended. He is now in custody and has given no motive. Authorities are saying it is not terrorism related. By Norwegian law, police officers can't carry firearms unless they have prior approval. This attack is the first one in actually quite some time. The previous attack of any significance was the Oslo Mosque shooting in 2019, and prior to that, the Norwegian man who killed 77 people, most of them teenagers, in a gun and rampage. He was sentenced to 21 years in prison for that, the maximum allowed in Norwegian law. In what is being hailed as a transformational shift, and something that happened actually very quietly, but is nonetheless astonishing, the single largest change to immigration enforcement since 1986 came out of the Biden administration yesterday, when it announced that it would no longer target undocumented workers, but instead target employers in their enforcement of the hold one second, please. In their enforcement of immigration policy. So in a 3-page memo from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, I guess is I'm hoping that's the way to pronounce it, issued an immediate moratorium on all immigration raids on workplaces and called on law enforcement agencies to instead focus their efforts on, quote, unscrupulous employers who exploit the vulnerability of undocumented workers. He directed immigration agencies to create a plan to protect whistleblowers who come forward with allegations of abuse or exploitation by employers, and gave those agencies 60 days to do so. It's been illegal, actually, to hire undocumented workers since 1986. However, since law enforcement has actually been focusing on the workers and not the businesses, most of those laws have generally not been enforced. Further, that because these laws have not been enforced, businesses have been able to take advantage of undocumented workers, exploiting and abusing them without consequence, since really, being undocumented, these workers had no recourse. Now, what's interesting, there's a number of things interesting about this. Aside from the human rights issues involved in the exploitation of undocumented workers, which, whether they should be here or not, is a completely separate issue. Let's grant, for the sake of argument, that they are not allowed to be here, they shouldn't be, and that, in fact, we should deport them as soon as possible. Grant all that for a moment. You still can't tolerate the exploitation of those workers in the time pending before either they get caught or we export them, or whatever it is that you plan on doing. I'm giving them a spanking. I don't know what it is, but whatever you plan on doing, it has to be the case that in a moral country and in an ethical country, you still can't allow the exploitation of these people. So it's about time that this issue was addressed. This one's been around for quite some time, and I think also Joe does in fact have some interesting takes on that. So again, I'm hoping he will grace us with his presence soon. I wasn't sure how late he was going to be, and I know if we started at least close to on time, people would just wonder what show they're watching. So decided to wait a little bit, but had to go forward. This exploitation, aside from hurting them, actually hurts American workers, believe it or not, because Americans are complaining about the fact that they can't compete with undocumented workers? Well, one of the reasons is because you can't exploit American workers the same way in this country, or at least it's very hard to do. Pretty easy to exploit undocumented workers. They have no one they can call. They can't report anything. So if all of a sudden their rights are being enforced, their human rights are being enforced, that raises the bar for everybody. The rising tide raises all boats, and all of a sudden now you're competing with people who have to be treated roughly similarly to you. So I think even from a conservative standpoint, I would hope that this law would be, or this change in policy would be positively received. Now, these raids had actually already been stopped by the Obama administration. The Obama administration did nothing to create up any sort of whistleblower hotline or to, thank you, Maya, appreciate your support. What was I saying? The Obama administration hadn't actually done anything to make life easier for them in the sense of giving them a way to report employers who were taking advantage of them, but did stop the raids. Anyone who wants to guess why those started up again, I don't think, I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by even saying how and why those raids started back up again. At any rate, they have now been suspended as of yesterday, and we have once again the largest shift in policy regarding undocumented workers since the Reagan administration. A new study is suggesting that the coronavirus can have long-term side effects well past the original infection. Now, we've known this for a while, and anywhere between 15 and 36% of COVID survivors have reported memory loss, cognitive deficits, and or difficulty concentrating. I wouldn't know anything about that. A study at Oxford University, which compared the brains of 785 participants, found that in some cases, coronavirus not only appeared to shrink the brain, but also reduce the gray matter thickness and caused more than 60 other long-term changes to the brain. It has added to the collection of long-haul symptoms that include brain fog, disorientation, and in some cases even a change in personality or psychosis. The areas that it affects appears to be what's called the olfactory bulb, which is a hub for a number of things. Obviously, your sense of smell, which is interesting given the other side effects of COVID that we've known. It also, however, is responsible for elements of memory and cognition. At this point, it's theorized that at least some of the cases, some of these cases, in some of these cases, the problem is actually more the autoimmune system and the immune response than the virus itself. But this is actually not all that unusual. There are a number of viruses that wreak havoc on the human brain in one way or another. Rabies and polio are two great examples. Herpes and shingles are interesting because you can appear to have been cured of them and test negative and have no sign of either of those, and yet the symptoms lie in wait, and years later you can get hit with, just broadsided with all sorts of permanent debilitating conditions caused by the original infection. So it's one of those, we get back to, I'm aware of people who say that perhaps COVID isn't all that bad, and the numbers aren't as bad as they could be, and we need to save the economy, and they're not all bad arguments. But the other thing that people don't remember, two things. One, we're not just fighting COVID, we're fighting all the variants that will come out if we fail to address this properly, and we don't know what those will be. I guarantee you Delta isn't the worst. It's the worst right now, but if we don't get it under control on a long enough time scale, I guarantee you we'll get one that's worse. All it takes is time. How much time? Nobody knows. This is still a novel virus in many ways. But we're fighting the unknown, and we're fighting the fact that we don't know what this does to people 30 years out. Most people may not care 30 years out. 30 years out isn't as big a deal to me. Might be to my kids. So these are interesting studies, and I think it's one of those things that we're going to keep an eye on, and we encourage people who are concerned about their health and the health of, in this case, I am not exaggerating when I say every human being on the planet, when they're concerned about these things. So that's where we stand. Now, in anticipation of what we believe is going to be a winter spike in infections, many countries in Europe are now strengthening their mask mandates, requiring medical-grade face masks in the hope of, wow. Speaking of being a little brain fogged, I do apologize, and I'll try to get my concentration a little better under control. Medical-grade face masks in the hope of slowing the transmission of COVID. Now, Bavaria has actually introduced the strongest measures so far, requiring surgical-grade N95 respirators that filter air both ways for anyone who's going to the store or is going to be using public transportation. Oh, dear Lord. No, I hadn't seen that. Titan is now saying, I don't know if Nick saw this, and I did not. But a new paper shows that the testes may act as a reservoir, meaning that COVID-19 may also be an STD, which would be interesting, unfortunate. But it's viruses. They are nothing if not interesting in their mechanics and the way they keep surprising us. They're clever. They're not. They got no brains, but they're clever anyway. It's evolution. Meanwhile, on Monday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed an executive order banning all state entities, including private employers, from enforcing any vaccine mandates. This is in addition to a previous order in which he banned local and state governments from issuing their own mandates and barring school districts from requiring masks for their students and barring any kind of vaccine passport system. Quote, too many Texans have been sidelined from employment opportunities. Too many small businesses have struggled to pay their bills. This must end. It's time now to open Texas 100%. In late August, Dawn Huffins, a Republican primary challenger to Texas Governor Greg Abbott. What I'm going to do here is it looks like we may have Joe, so I'm going to see if we can get Joe in here. Now, this is now, please, nobody, hold on a sec. Nobody, and I mean nobody, give Joe a hard time about it being on time, not in time. He is, in fact, on time for this show, half an hour late, but we don't recognize time in the same way that the rest of the universe does. So, and that's what makes the show special, of course. Time just kind of is a little more fluid here. All right, so he's I've gotten in contact with Joe, and he will be joining us momentarily. I will continue until then. So this challenger, Dawn Huffins, who's a Republican primary challenger to Texas Governor Greg Abbott. For those of you who don't understand the U.S. system, Greg Abbott is a Republican. That means ostensibly he has the support of the Republican Party, but it's really only in the general election. During the primaries, any other Republican can challenge him for the throne. And usually when a governor is seen as weak or a president is seen as weak, they will get a primary challenge. Primary challenges to presidents are extremely rare. It happens. The last one was, I think, Ted Kennedy, who issued a primary challenge to a sitting president. Ooh. But anyways, Greg Abbott does have governors, it's a little more frequent, and nobody usually takes it seriously. This man is attempting, he wants to be governor. He wants to be governor on the Republican ticket. And so he said that Governor Greg Abbott was, quote, promoting transgender sexual policies to Texas youth and, quote, pushing liberal agendas on pushing the liberal transgender agenda. Say that 5 times fast. These are not Texas Texas values, he said. These are not Republican values, but these are obviously Greg Abbott's values. He was referring to a webpage published by the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. Now, this webpage contained a section called, quote, Gender Identity and Sexual Orientation, and contained links to a number of resources, including Suicide Prevention Hotline and other resources dedicated, quote, that were dedicated to helping empower and celebrate young LGBTQ people. Hours after this comment, the webpage was taken down. Also taken down was an entire website for the Texas Youth Connection, a division of Family and Protective Services that was designed to assist all children, including but not limited to LGBTQ children as they prepared to transition out of foster care. A spokesman for the department suggested that this was actually part of a necessary review, but declined to confirm or deny that this was done explicitly as a result of Huffin's attack. However, records obtained through a Freedom of Information request show that the agency employees did in fact explicitly discuss taking down the webpage as a result of Huffins's comments, and discussed it within hours of when the page came down. Chief executive of the LGBTQ advocacy group of the advocacy group Equality Texas, said that the LBGTQ kids are disproportionately represented in foster care and face, quote, truly staggering discrimination and abuse. He pointed out that they were more than 3 times likely to have attempted suicide, having been through the foster care system, and that now these resources, which were in fact being used every day, were no longer available to them. This content, I'll skip that. Already covered that. Now, Huffins came out shortly after this and said, quote, we are not surprised that state employees were loyal to Greg Abbott and had to scramble after we called out the perverse actions. I promised Texans that I would rid them of that website, and I kept my promise. Yeah, he single-handedly took the web. Okay. In Texas, I totally get this. I understand what he's saying. Meanwhile, Jenny Cudd, a 37-year-old Texan florist, has become the 100th person to plead guilty in connection with the January 6th insurrection. She faces up to 1 year in prison. Cudd claimed that she was sorry for her actions, that she knew she shouldn't have done it, and was actually always repentant, and really kind of got swept up in the day, and that she would never do it again. In response, prosecutors showed a video that she had posted on Facebook in which she said, quote, fuck yes, I'm proud of my actions. I fucking charged the Capitol today with patriots today. She said it twice. Hell yes, I'm proud of my actions. I would absolutely do it again. Of the 100 guilty pleas so far, 17 have been sentenced, ranging from probation to 8 months in prison. There remain roughly 535 people who have been charged and are awaiting either trial or some kind of deal. Meanwhile, many of the high-powered lawyers who had represented Donald Trump in the past are now declining to assist him in any of the legal activities in regards to the January 6th insurrection, including but not limited to his assertion of executive privilege over the documents that show what he was doing and who he was talking to during that day. Trump is planning to exert executive privilege. The current thinking is that the documents actually belong to the White House and not to him. And if that's the case, executive privilege must be invoked by the sitting president, who has already said he will not do so in this case. A number of these attorneys that have, in fact, helped Trump in the past and are now saying they will not continue to do so, have said off the record that they won't, either because of ethical complications ethical complications, or that he was simply impossible to work with as a client, which I find really very easy to believe. Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell are currently facing defamation suits for the work that they've done on behalf of Trump, and Giuliani has had his license suspended. I think it's Cleta Mitchell was forced out of her law firm as a result of the work that she's done for Trump. And a number of other lawyers who have worked for Trump have either been sanctioned or faced legal consequences for how they conducted themselves in this work. 4 of the most supportive lawyers in Trump's circle, which includes Jones Day, Charles Cooper, Mark Flipp, and Paul Clement, have now all officially refused to assist Trump any further in any of his legal proceedings going forward. This leaves his current team rather fractured and absent, among other things, a lead attorney and attorney responsible for communication. Meanwhile, as the TSA is, one more thing. And I thought I saw it. No, I did not. So we're still waiting on Joe. He's teasing me. He's a tease. Lastly, the TSA is facing a looming workforce crisis, which could have a dramatic impact on aviation in this country. They are required to be 100% vaccinated as of November 22nd. However, right now, only 60% of their workforce is vaccinated. Now, there's still 6 weeks, presumably, but there's 6 weeks to November 22nd. However, you have to realize, as all of us know by now, that you normally need to take 2 doses of the vaccine. They have to be staggered, and even then, you're not usually considered fully vaccinated until 2 weeks after the second dose. Based on the Moderna vaccine and the requirements for the staggering of that vaccine and how long you have to wait between doses, that vaccine will no longer be sufficient to vaccinate someone by that deadline. That was passed 3 days ago. If a TSA worker were to take that vaccine now, they would miss the deadline. Even if they did everything as aggressively as possible, the Moderna vaccine takes too long. The Pfizer vaccine will no longer have enough time to meet that deadline by October 18th. So anyone by the 18th who has not taken the Pfizer vaccine will be unable to take it and meet the TSA deadline. The TSA has said that they fully expect every single remaining worker to meet that deadline, but given the fact that they really have until 18th to start the process and they are still down 40%, the thinking is that they are likely to miss this deadline, and really by a significant margin. So we will see. We will keep an eye on that. I will admit, I really feel, having written kind of a good outline for this rundown, that I feel like I'm missing something reasonably big. Don't know what it is. We'll see. Joe may give me some insight as to that. So what I'm going to do is look into the live chat a little bit, and we will see what's going on. I'm going to double check and just make sure here. So we covered, Texas has had so much going on with it. There's the Texas website. There was the, did I cover? Oh, yes, I covered. Okay, Texas, this new mask thing from Texas is, and Biden has come out and spoken about that and said that, what they're doing obviously is going to be endangering other people. This is an interesting, the problem, and in my view, the counter argument to this, which has to be applied, and I believe that somebody has already sued a state. Someone in the live chat may know which state, so if I could refresh my memory, I'd appreciate it. But the reality is, I have to send my kids to school. And I think that's a good thing. In this country, your kids actually have to go to school. It's the law. So if you don't go to school, or if your kids miss an extended amount of school without a good reason, the truancy officer will knock. So we talk about freedom, but I'm actually not free to not educate my kids. And again, I'm for that. But let's understand that, we are kind of used to giving up at least some freedoms that are important. But the flip side to that coin, because my children are required to be in school, the state is required to meet certain elements. One of them is that my child is safe. They are required by law to do that. They don't have a choice. And the reason is, if I'm going to be required to send my children there, they have to make sure it's safe. So and I think it is in Texas. All right, thank you. I think that somewhere in Texas, I'll have to catch it. I think I may have that in a sec. But they are suing because, oh, yes, I think was it a breakthrough? No, it was actually, no, I believe it was a child who died. I'm going to stop guessing and see if I can. Oh, and where's my, there we go. Yeah, let's just see if I happen to have that. Oh, thank you, Titan. I'll include that. Thank you. So meanwhile, I'll stumble across the. I'm trying to recall, and my memory has been having. It's I go weeks where my memory is close to where I feel it should be, and then days like this where. What was I saying? At any rate, so there was. I think it was actually a mother whose child died from COVID in a school that was not having required masks. And it's like, okay, I do genuinely understand. I do understand, and I'm marginally sympathetic to the position that, freedom, and, you shouldn't be able to force people to do things they don't want to do. On the flip side, you are a weapon. And we do have laws against weapons in schools. And COVID turns every human being potentially into a lethal weapon. So I think that's Joe. So let me I have my 3 seconds to respond and get him in. Oh, there he is, Joe. How are you?
Here I am.
Hey. Oh my God! And you just popped in right away. It's almost as if the guy producing this knew what he was doing. We all know that's not the case.
No, I can't be.
Yeah. You didn't have to agree so quickly. You fucking thanks.
Yeah. Well, what threw me off is I read your message at 8, and you said, "I'll see you in 90 minutes," and my brain did the math from 8 o'clock, not from 7:30 when you sent the message.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it. I do that all the time. Son of a, oh dear Lord. All right, and I think even the audio kicked in on its own, so that would be amazing. So it looks like everyone can hear. How you doing?
I'm doing mostly okay. I still in pain from my fall 2 weeks ago.
Well, that's kind of your fault. You decided you were going to aggressively attack the asphalt. I mean, what did you expect was going to happen?
I thought I'd win.
Oh,
I was wrong.
I was wrong. What was well, you weren't just doing Ron White, were you?
Yes, I was.
You were. Oh, I can't believe I guessed it. Okay, yeah, that was it. That was, I don't know, just the intonation I picked up. I realized that sounded like a Ron White, but that's yeah. And I was
right
wrong. I didn't know how many people it would have taken for them to throw me out of that bar, but I knew how many they were going to use. So that's a handy piece of information.
Exactly. Yeah. He said, "Get out of here." And I said no, and I was wrong.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, get out of here. You're out of here. I was like, I don't think so, Scooter.
Yep.
All right, so we do have a couple of okay. Oh, perfect. So
what have you covered so far?
Just about everything. So let me quickly. There's two interesting pieces of news. I was trying to remember, and actually I'll inline that one. The other one, parents of mass children who caught. Okay, so those were two, and then perfect Titan. Oh wow, Titan's really okay. He's Johnny on the spot with all of this. So we have right now the January 6th committee has just subpoenaed former acting Attorney General Jeffrey Clark. Is that what? Okay. Senate report has revealed that Clark drafted a letter urging state legislatures to nullify Joe Biden's victory. Yeah, I mean it just keeps getting worse the more we learn. So what have I covered?
Yeah. So
yeah.
So anyone who says that it wasn't a coup is clearly wrong.
Oh, I've been avoiding saying that for any number of reasons. In part two, I was just like, look, we believe in a fair trial and this and that, but there's enough evidence now that there were people who were at least intending it to be a coup. Yeah, I'm aware some people got kind of swept up, but they got to be a little careful. Yeah, I got swept up into breaking and entering into the Capitol building. I mean, it seemed like a good idea to grab Nancy Pelosi's wine and start drinking it on the floor of the House there, but nonetheless, yeah, it was an attempted coup. So there isn't much of a way to apply much more charity to that.
And mind you, not everybody that participated knew that that's what was going on, but that doesn't make it less of a coup. That just makes them dupes.
That's why 678 people have been indicted on this, and every single one of them has to be tried individually because they're all individuals who partook at different. It's that's what's great about this system, but that's why it takes so fucking long. So we covered the breaking news as of about 3 or 4 hours ago that a suspect in Norway used a bow and arrow to kill 5 people. Do me a favor and, next staff meeting, don't tell Azandring that one. I don't know if yeah, we won't. No, Azandring. No. It's guns that are the problem, and only guns. And let's stay on that one.
Actually, I'm happy to bring it up to him because he'll say, "We'll see," and I'm like, "Well, how many times that mass bowing versus mass shooting?"
Mass bowing. Okay, I shouldn't be laughing because it is but it's like a mass bowing. Yeah. Okay. Well, and with any luck, he's not in the live chat. So we covered that, and then we covered the transformational shift, the largest change to immigration since 1989, and where Biden has said that they're going to start targeting employers and not the workers, and that they are going to be creating a new way. They have 60 days. The agencies have 60 days to create a whistleblower system where people can allege abuse or exploitation by employers. They've also stopped the raids that had actually been stopped under the Obama administration, but somehow they're going again. And I just couldn't figure out what happened between Obama and Biden that got all these raids going again. But apparently,
Trump.
Oh no, not the sweetheart, the tangerine sweetheart. Yeah.
So, well, and this is a pretty big deal. I mean, the funny thing is, I've been saying to right wingers for ages that if they were really serious and really wanted to do something about the supposed jobs that are being lost, which I don't believe are actually being lost, but they actually wanted to curb, undocumented workers, they would go after the companies that hire them. Because if you take away the jobs, potential, places that would hire them, then they're not going to be here because if there's no jobs, they're not going to come for work. But yet the fact that the right wing never ever has really never charged, gone after those companies and only ever gone after the workers, that tells me everything. To me, that tells me everything you need to know.
Well, and that's a really good point. That's a really good point. The reality is that you don't have to give these guys health care. If these guys get injured, you can sit there and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're injured. Go home and I will permanently replace you with somebody else and you can't feed your kids, or stay here and keep working and maybe you'll still get your paycheck." They can do that to these people. And the amount of exploitation where the undocumented ones, presumably in the U.S. under normal circumstances, the wages go up because there's competition for the workforce. But here, it's a race to the bottom with the lowest wages, and they can bid for whoever's willing to work for the lowest amount, and that's who the American worker is competing with. And if you've got a problem with that, and if that really is costing American jobs, there are many solutions to that. One of them is to try to export all of them. Another solution is to make sure that they can't be exploited that way. And if you make it so that businesses can't exploit them in that sense, all of a sudden everything else becomes competitive, and the American worker, which again in this scenario, it's just a perspective. This isn't my position, but in this scenario, these guys are taking all the American jobs. Well, they're not going to be able to really do that anymore this way.
Right. And the other thing too is that the right wing never seems to worry about the jobs that do get exported. So they don't have a problem with people who are not American citizens getting the job. They just don't want them to be here, which is ridiculous because if they're here, they actually are paying some taxes at least, and they are contributing to the American economy in a much more direct way. Plus the fact that, like you said, because they don't get the benefits that a lot of people seem to think that they get, they're actually contributing more to the economy than they take out of it. And this is the reason why lettuce is $1.79 a head and not $5.
And every study that has searched this has said, especially over time. So that's actually, so a little caveat, and my numbers may be off, it's been a while, but as I recall, they actually do take from the economy a touch. It's like the net for their first year or two here, they take a small amount out, but it's like they produce 90% of what an American produces versus what they take out. So it's a small difference. And then over time, they end up usually being harder workers and contributing more to the economy than even most Americans. And the net has always been, I think the total amount, like I said, for the average immigrant to the U.S., it's been 135%. And it's like, okay, they're putting back significantly more than they're taking out over time. They just have to, as you would imagine, they have to learn the language, they have to get up to speed and start. But once they do, they're
generally more productive than U.S. citizens doing the same job, and they cost less, and they get fewer benefits. So it's very easy math right there.
Well, and now this was on Monday, a U.S.-based economist won the Nobel Prize in economics for research that has quote transformed widely held ideas about the labor force, showing how an increase in the minimum wage does not hinder hiring, and immigrants do not lower pay for native-born workers. And to quote here the Associated Press, actually, I think, no, I just did. So, yeah, it was, I don't have the, where's his name? Can't find his name, but it was on Monday, the Nobel Prize in Economics for a study or for research that he's done that seems to indicate that the raising minimum wage does not hinder hiring, and that B, immigrants do not lower pay for native-born workers. This came out on the 11th, so good timing.
Well, and of course not, because generally speaking, they're not taking jobs that American citizens really take. I mean, there was a few years back in North Carolina, they really did crack down actually on the companies that were hiring, and they kind of forced them to try to hire at least citizens or permanent residents and people legal to work in the country, and they found that they weren't getting enough people, and then particularly the American-born citizens weren't staying. A lot of them didn't last a week. Some of them didn't even last out the day, because a lot of them were a lot of these undocumented workers work in agriculture. It's backbreaking work. It's very difficult. The working conditions suck, and people just don't want to do it. And so, as most people on the left have been saying for years, that they're doing the jobs that no one else wants to do. My only issue is that, we need to make sure that they don't get exploited. So, because even when they were getting paid, a minimum wage or above in North Carolina, again, they weren't. It was just the the American citizens were not staying in the job because it's a horrible job.
All right, we have a $5 super chat from the Sinister Porpoise. The pandemic has made that not the case for most professions, with the exception of teachers in public schools. I'm not sure what that was in regards to. Hopefully, she will clarify that. That was at least a few minutes back, and so I'm actually just starting to catch up with the live chat now. I will catch up with the live chat, catch up with all you guys. Got Joe in, so I'm going to tell him where we've been. We're going to go on to the next one, and then we'll. Unless was there anything else you wanted to say on the DHS, the changes to immigration enforcement?
No, I think we covered that well.
Perfect. So the next one was Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and a couple of things regarding him. So first of all, he has upped the ante and is now saying that in addition to his original executive order stating that local governments and the state government could not have mask mandates, saying that schools could not mandate masks, and saying that there could be no passport system, he has now doubled down on that and come up with a new executive order on Monday that said any state entity, which includes, by the way, private employers, could not have any form of vaccine mandate This is added to his previous mandates, and he has said, quote, "Too many Texans have been sidelined from employment opportunities. Too many small businesses have struggled to pay their bills. This must end. It's time to open Texas 100%. And he's also gotten into another issue with a primary challenger, but let's stick with this for now.
Well, what gets me with this is that, so when he mentions small business, he's putting forth an executive order that actually prevents small business from doing what they want to do. So the idea that he gives a crap about small business is a complete lie. And it's an overreach. This is definitely got to be a violation there. Basically there's precedence for actually having the mandates, but not the opposite. And I don't think that it'll survive, a challenge if it goes to court.
Well, and that further, the other interesting thing, so I guess a Wisconsin brewery is helping parents sue the school district. And the reason for that is this. The 14th Amendment protects people from a state-created danger. And it's one of the things I was speaking about shortly before you came in, which is I'm required to send my kids to school. I have to. It's it's the law. So the state is obligated to protect my children while in school. If the state is saying that it's not going to protect my kids from weapons, which at this point is the other students, and I'm really not using hyperbole here. If you have COVID, you have become a weapon. How lethal you are depends on how many people you come into contact with and a variety of other factors. But you can't say you're not potentially quite lethal, and it may be reasonably benign. It depends on, you're a weapon one way or another. And so a school is filled with these weapons, and they are not protecting children so that's the argument. And I guess it's at a minimum, the lawsuit appears to have started in Wisconsin. And again, it appears like it's for violating the 14th Amendment right to be protected from, quote, state-created danger. And it's the parents of actually masked students who caught COVID from unmasked students. So, that I wholeheartedly endorse. And honestly, even if I wasn't for mandates for adults or anything like that, the problem is you're forcing kids to, or say either you get a mask and or vaccination, or you do home learning, which, by the way, the state would be required to pay for, because, again, the state requires you to be educated, so the burden is actually on them. This is a common precedent. If a child cannot go to school, the state must accommodate them, and at the state's cost. I wouldn't say no problem with it, but as a compromise, I'd be okay with it. And if somebody really doesn't want their kids masked, fine. The state will pay, and they do it at home. We're talking about kids' lives, and you cannot have a school. Yeah, it's not.
Well, and it's not just the kids' lives too, because that means they also become a vector to bring it to parents, potentially grandparents. It's see, this is the thing that the right wing doesn't ever get. When it comes to rights, first off, no right is absolute. Secondly, it's when you start the greater chance you have for impacting others is the more that the state has the right and the duty to regulate that behavior. That's the whole point of laws, is so that to basically form bright lines between my rights and your rights, so that I have the right to do whatever I do as long as I'm not harming other people. And so that's what the regulations are for, is to figure out where those points are to the best of our ability. And we don't always get it right, but that's the whole point of laws, is so that maximum freedom doesn't mean absolute freedom. It means that you have freedom and I have freedom, and that as long as we stay within certain boundaries, that I won't negatively impact you too much, and you won't negatively impact me too much. And if that's too imbalanced, we find a point where I'm harming you too much, or vice versa, then that's how we have to either create a law or amend a law.
I have a slightly different way of looking at it. It's actually, I think, the same thing, but I want to run just a slightly different angle by you, which is we're free to do anything we want, including murder. We're free to do anything we want. However, everybody else also has freedoms, including the freedom to stay alive. So the conflict is, well, I want to murder you, you want to stay alive. Which freedom is more important? And then we decide, and those laws are I think it really is kind of the same thing you're saying. So it's pretty much the same concept, yeah. But the reason I'm framing it this way is because I think this helps too when you talk about people who say, well, a child who was adopted wants to have their medical information, and people tell me all the time, they have a right to that medical information. I don't care. The parents have a right to be anonymous. What I care about is which right is more important. But the fact that it's a right, in my view, if it wasn't, we wouldn't be having the disagreement. So I think they do have a right to their medical history. They absolutely have a right to their medical history. The question is, do the parents have a right to anonymity? And to some extent, I believe they have to, but it has to end somewhere too. So the question is, where do we find that balance? I have a right to go down the street and not listen to music I don't like. I have that right, but people have a right to play the music. So our values indicate where at any given time we find that balance.
Right. Well, and in the case there, certainly if they want to remain anonymous, they don't have to send their kid to public school. They can homeschool, they can send them to a private school, or whatever. There are options. But that's the thing that people basically, it seems for a long time in my life, people on the right wing seem to think that their rights are unbounded, but other people's rights should be bounded, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. All right. So we covered that. The other interesting thing, and I don't know. So Don Huffins is a Republican primary challenger to Greg Abbott, and he came out and said that Greg Abbott was pushing the liberal transgender agenda, and that he was promoting transgender sexual policies to Texas youth, and that these are not Republican values, they're not Texas values, but they obviously are Greg Abbott's values. And he was referring to a website published by the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. And the website included a section called Gender Identity and Sexual Orientation, and included a number of resources, including to a suicide prevention hotline, one dedicated to helping empower and celebrate young LGBTQ people, and also to a website to help young kids, all kids, including but not limited to LGBTQ, who were coming out of the foster care system, helping them get jobs, helping them get counseling, helping them get housing, and helping with a suicide hotline, which apparently for LGBTQ is they are 3 times at risk for attempting suicide. And all of that was taken down just a few hours after this accusation was made. We know now from internal documents that this was done explicitly because of this attack, and he's trying to win his primary, so he took all this information down. Huffins came out and said, I promised Texas I would take the website down, and I have delivered. So,
yeah,
Texas,
and it just shows how shitty they are, because it's this idea that that's promoting, or it's an acknowledgement that trans people exist, and therefore that's shoving somebody down somebody's throat. That's the way these people think, and it's pathetic. It's like, look, people exist, and again, what we're just talking about rights. It's their rights are absolute. They want the right to offend, and they don't want the right to be offended. It's bullshit. The agenda of we're going to treat trans people as human beings like every other fucking human being on the planet. That's somehow, if that's anathema to you, you're a scumbag. So it just shows how craven Abbott is, because the fact that, obviously they removed it in response to this. And it also shows how afraid they are of their base and how depraved their base is. That they don't want to, even say, hey, look, if you're suffering and you need some help, we're going to provide help for you. But if you're trans, somehow that's, and then these people think they're Christians. They call themselves Christians, and they think they believe in that guy from the Bible, and don't believe in any of that shit.
I want to just clarify, and just because it's an interesting point when we start getting into the theory of law and or philosophy of law, actually, for me. But I do actually argue that you have the right to go down the sidewalk and not hear music you don't like. And this is based on John Stuart Mill's harm principle. But understanding this is very important because it's been so badly abused. It's worth understanding. John Stuart Mill said that everything should be legal, absolutely everything, except that which harms somebody else. So if I can demonstrate that hearing music I don't like to raises my whatever the Igosol or whatever that thing is that causes stress and causes me to age faster. Well, you've just harmed me, so it should be illegal. So
I'm going to take a little bit issue on your interpretation of Mill, because he's actually one of the few philosophers I actually think was worth a damn.
Let me finish the thought, and then I'd love to say here. So the only argument that I'm making is twofold. First of all, so nowadays, harm has been watered down to mean even that which you find offensive. And of course, if we're going to have a free speech, that cannot alone be sufficient in terms of harm. So when it comes down trying to understand, so the harm principle is the founding principle for law in this country is you make it free unless it's harming somebody. The problem is we have changed that definition of harm. So I steer into that and admit that all harm is theoretically supposed to be illegal, but since you can't practically do that, we have to measure harms and we have to find some way to quantify them. I cannot be permitted to just order people to turn off music that they like, because even if it does harm me, that's not possible. So the question is, where do you find that balance? What were you gonna say?
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I mean, as far as but it kind of illustrates your point about the fact that we view harm differently now. That's kind of what I was getting at with the right wing, because they want the right not to be offended, but they want the right to offend. So they're not even congruous in their they don't have a consistent belief system as far as what constitutes harm or how harm should be mitigated. Now, my point about Mill was that Mill's goal is about doing the least harm. So what he looked at whereas Kant looked at, well, what would happen if this happened to every single individual? And Mill had that more utilitarian. His thing was, what causes the least amount of harm? So we basically have to do. So that was part of his thing of measuring harm and then comparing the harm from the individual and also the group. Because if it applied to the group, that would also be harmful. If nobody could play music, that would be harmful to the group. But on the same token, we do have laws that say, yeah, you can play your music, but beyond a certain time of day, you can't play it louder than a certain amount, because now you're disrupting people's ability to sleep and things like that.
All right. I still haven't actually caught up with what Porpoise meant by the pandemic has made that not the case for most professions. I would like to know that, and especially as a teacher and knowing that the Porpoise also teaches, I'm always interested in her view on these things. And I will clarify, it is $400 for people who work. It's $400. It's a long story. Titan was there. There are a few other people in the live chat who were present. It was about 2 years ago. It's a long story. At any rate, going forward. So, and I did remember this. So, and then we had at least one other thing that we missed. So that's, let me just check and see if there's anything else. There was another small thing, I think, but nothing really worth. And then, okay, so the content we do have, and just in terms of, it's nice to see real forward momentum starting to gather on this. Speaking of Texas, Jenny Cudd, a 37-year-old Texas florist, has become the 100th person to plead guilty in connection with the January 6th insurrection. She faces a year in prison. I shit you not, she claimed A, that she was sorry. B, she knew she shouldn't have done it, just got kind of swept up in it. C, that she was now and has actually always been repentant and very sorry she had done it. And D, that she would never do it again. Prosecutors then showed a video she posted in her Facebook in which she said, quote, "Fuck yes, I'm proud of my actions. I fucking charged the Capitol today with Patriots today." Yes, she said today twice. She's not a poet. She's a revolutionary hero, not a writer. Hell yes, I'm proud of my actions. I would absolutely do it again.
Yeah.
Oops. So they're out of 100 guilty pleas so far, 17 have been sentenced, ranging from probation to 8 months. The remaining 535 people who have been charged but have not yet reached a conclusion are awaiting trial or awaiting to see if they're going to plead that out. So that's, they've done 100 out of 535. The Sixth Commission is just starting to ramp up, and most of the lawyers who have ever associated with Trump have said they will not get involved. Giuliani is, of course, getting in more trouble. A couple other lawyers are getting in more. So we covered that, but the long story short is it looks like January 6th is starting to ramp up, and I think I just mentioned earlier that we now know that they're going to be They've subpoenaed acting Attorney General Jeffrey Clark to see what he has to say. And I think they should go after Bannon, because I'm really sick and tired of this. Congress says you're going to speak before Congress. And people are like, nope, sorry, we're not going to show up, which we should have dealt with when it happened at the very first impeachment. At the first impeachment, people said, no, we're not. I was sitting there going like, you cannot tolerate that. Like, oh, we'll look the other way. Oh, sometimes Democrats disgust me, to be quite honest. But anyways, what are your thoughts?
Well, the problem is the only means they have of enforcing the subpoenas with the Capitol Police. They have literally no other legal avenue other than that. So it's kind of hard. I guess you could get U.S. Marshals, but of course, if when the executive is controlled by the Republicans, they weren't going to use the Marshals for that purpose. So what are you going to do?
Okay, COVID-19 has put, Sinister is saying COVID-19 has put an upward pressure on wages. I think what she was then saying was this is accepting teachers who, by the way, are now risking their lives, which is something that most people don't think about. But teachers, okay, so you're not going to have a mask mandate. How many students does a teacher see in a day? What's the likelihood of a teacher contracting this? And it may be worth noting that the average teacher, the average age of the average teacher is, I think it was like 6 to 8 years closer to retirement than for any other profession. They're older than the average workforce, so they're going to be more vulnerable. I don't. The number of things that people don't seem to care about is staggering.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I think that.
So.
And then I think last is
I know.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I know I probably missed it earlier. And I know yesterday you talked about the whole Chappelle thing for a couple of hours. I don't want to go too deep into it, but it just kind of goes to what we were talking about before about the right wing and offense, and even now, like what I'm basically what I'm angry at right now. I saw Chappelle's special. I'm angry at him, but I'm even more angry at the people that are coming out to defend him, like, and in really grotesque ways. Like Damon Wayans compared being a comedian now to slavery. Jesus. That's just fucking, insulting and infuriating, especially coming from a black dude. It's like, man, that people criticizing your speech is not slavery. It's not cancel culture. It's nothing. You have the right to say whatever ridiculous bullshit you want to say, whether it's inflammatory, insulting, all that. And people get to critique what you say. And you can comment on theirs, and they can comment on yours, and that's the way it works. As I always say, free speech is a multi-lane highway. So, I'm sick and tired of this namby-pamby, like, they're criticizing our jokes. It's just jokes. Toughen up. They're the one, and they're calling everybody else too sensitive. Grow a fucking pair of whatever, or get the appropriate gonads for your gender, and fucking stop complaining that people don't like your jokes. If people don't like your jokes, get different audiences or change your jokes. But this bullshit of like they're being fucking held down and being whipped or whatever. This is such horseshit. And Chappelle weaponized the black struggle to attack the trans community, and he was really like one of my 2-3 favorite comedians of all time. But he has burnt the bridge. He's disintegrated that bridge. I will never forgive him for weaponizing the struggle that he and I both go through to attack trans people, because that didn't help us. That all it did was hurt trans people and giving talking points to really disgusting people who attack trans people. And so I got no truck with him in the future. And the people that are defending him are reprehensible. And when you compare it to slavery, Bill Maher is just as bad. It's the same bullshit.
What did Bill Maher?
They don't want to accept criticism.
I wasn't aware of what Bill Maher said. What did Bill Maher say?
No, just in general. I mean, well, he's been going on the last 2 years. He basically, going back to 2016, he blames basically the fact that on the left, for the most part, people are coming to accept transgenders people identity. That's why we lost the 2016 election, which is just the biggest thing of horseshit. He keeps going on about identity politics, and yeah, it was identity politics, but not that. It was basically angry white dudes found their savior. They found the guy who would go out there and say horrible things and make them feel better about saying horrible things. That was the identity that mattered in the 2016 election, not defending trans rights or gay rights or any of that other stuff. And I'm tired of the people that call us snowflakes, that whine constantly every time they get criticized for doing something shitty.
Well, I was actually literally, so it's perfect because I was actually literally about to say, because we did do the show yesterday, so, and I wanted it's news, which is obviously Chappelle has, it was called The Closer, and he's gotten a tremendous amount of criticism and is now saying that he wants to be canceled. And to make a point, so and we did cover it, so this was perfect timing. So, was there anything else that you wanted to say on that, or any other subject?
No, I think we got all the biggies. All the main stuff.
All right. Well, we are going to be having our open hang on Friday, and anybody is welcome to come in. I have a sneaking suspicion that this is going to be a topic there, and we're going to do it the same way that we've done our past topics. And in fact, we had some contention last time, and we handled it in exactly the fashion that we're going to continue to handle it going forward. Everybody gets to talk. Everybody gets to, as long as they're being civil. We're going to discuss any topic you want to that's going to be on the table. So that's Friday, 10 p.m. after dark. And otherwise, I think I've caught up with the live chat. Yeah, we do have a slightly longer lag than usual. So and speaking of, actually, just because of that, I want to make sure that we go to our credits and not straight to the bumper, so the show doesn't get cut short. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about the confusion. Look forward to
that was my fault. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an alarm, a recurring alarm on my phone, so I don't get confused again.
Perfect. No worries. Well, so we will see you next week, and to our audience and anyone else who wants to join us Friday. And then our next show after that will, of course, be in time on Tuesday. Thank you all for joining us, and we will catch up with you guys soon. Have a good night.